And joining us now from Washington is Middle East analyst Sigurd Neubauer. He is a former non-resident fellow at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. And Sigurd, let me just start by asking you about this latest news. We discussed it earlier, the United Arab Emirates announcing that it's going to reduce its forces and shift more towards a peaceful resolution to this conflict. How significant a development is that in ending this war?
Well, I would say that this is a tactical move from the United Arab Emirates, because the United Arab Emirates are not withdrawing all its forces from Yemen, but rather just around the port of Hudayda, which is on the western coast of Yemen, and it is through that port that all shipments of humanitarian supplies through the United Nations are entering into Yemen, and this is the only port that is open at this moment in Yemen. So the fact that the UAE are withdrawing their troops from there is expected. It is also consistent with the United Nations Security Council and also the UN peace process and the latest meeting that took place in December. So this is an important step. Diplomatically, of course, this will be seen as a confidence-building measures from the Houthis. The question is, of course, how the rebels will respond in kind.
Sigurd, let's help us understand the rationale for this war. It's increasingly unpopular in Western capitals, especially in Washington now. It's created this tremendous humanitarian catastrophe. Put it in the broader context of what's at stake in this battle over what is a poor country in what is basically a rich neighborhood.
Well, I would put it in different terms, and that is that the conflict in Yemen has not been able to achieve its initial objective, which was to roll back the Houthis and to restore the government of President Hadi, who was ousted in 2014, September 2014. And then, of course, in March 2015, that's when the Arab coalition rolled in, and they have been unable to restore the presidency. But what they have been able to do is basically through unlimited U.S. diplomatic protection from the Trump administration and through record numbers of sales, U.S. military sales to both Abu Dhabi and to Riyadh, what the Arab coalition have failed to do is to use that support to advance a ground game in which their objectives would be met. And instead, as you reported in your segment, what we have seen is that it has turned in a conflict into the world's most significant humanitarian catastrophe, which even exceeds Syria, which is very difficult to imagine.
Sigurd, I think you've given us a very good diagnosis of the situation. So let's look at your prognosis going forward. Is there a chance, a realistic chance in the near future for some kind of resolution? And what kind of, if it's so, what kind of shape do you think that would take?
There would have to be a couple of steps that would be taken by all parties. The first step would be, of course, for the Houthis to engage in goodwill gestures in exchange for the UAE's decision now to withdraw from Hudayda. That process will be spearheaded by Martin Griffith, the UN Secretary General's special representative for Yemen. So that's the first step. The second step, really, to accelerate the peace process is to bring back Oman into the diplomatic fold. Oman has hosted the Houthi spokesman and chief negotiator in Muscat really since the beginning of the war in 2015, so that he would be able to travel internationally to participate in the peace talks. What has hampered some of the peace process going forward is that the Saudis have dispatched some 5,000 troops right on Oman's border, in addition to several thousand militia fighters, some of them coming from Al-Qaeda. And that development has now taken place over the past 2 years, and it's really brought the war to Oman's border, so it's extraordinarily fragile. So in order to accelerate the peace process, it is really important that the Saudi coalition withdraw all forces from areas in which the Houthis are not operating, so that it can give the political space to the Omanis so that they can push forward and in support of the United Nations to help accelerate the peace process that has been somewhat dormant. So I think that all considered, I think that the UAE's decision to withdraw from Hudayda is a positive one.
Right. And Sigurd, briefly, you mentioned steps the Saudis would have to take. Do you think the Trump administration could or should put some pressure on him to take those measures?
Yes, the Trump administration has been consistent in that pressure. The problem, however, is not so much the pressure coming from Secretary Pompeo or even from National Security Advisor John Bolton. It is that in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, they believe that they could, at least up until now, capitalize on Trump's chaos to solidify strategic gains in Yemen. And because as long as the president is not involved personally, they have until now really ignored U.S. government request. But I think that this is beginning to change because now the United Arab Emirates have concluded that the foreign policy establishment in the United States and congressional opposition is just going in one direction. And if the United Arab Emirates do not take proactive moves, they could easily find us.
Sigurd Neubauer, that's all we have time for, but thank you for joining us.